Hello, and welcome to another Tarot Tuesday. Today we're going to be talking about the Devil card, which is my favorite card of the tarot, and its partner, the Lovers. These two cards are very similar. You can see their imagery is almost exactly the same. There are a couple of little details that are different, but mostly the same. So the Devil is what I call an uh-oh card, which means that every time I lay it down in a spread, my client tends to go, uh-oh, is that evil? Is that something bad? And I think that way of thinking about the Devil is just due to the bad rap that the Devil gets. And I think that it's undeserved. The Devil doesn't deserve that kind of rap. And I'm hoping to dispel some of that with this video. So, the Devil's traditional meanings are things like addiction and being enmeshed in materialism and allowing negative influences and negative patterns in your life to keep you back from success, being your best self, being whatever. It can also indicate, in some people's viewpoints, the shadow side of oneself. And from what I've read, a lot of people think that the shadow side of the self is our own internal negative influences that hold us back, and that's not true. The shadow is just the side of us that reveals hidden depths. The shadow is where you find your greatest challenges, and in that way, the Devil is the shadow self. So, the way that I read the card, every time it comes up in a spread, I think about where might there be connections to this person's need to learn and transform. It's kind of like it's a challenge card. It's a big challenge that's going to lead to vast ability, vast possibility for spiritual evolution. Whatever that is. Spiritual revealment, maybe. An opportunity to claim more power, more sovereignty. So, the Devil in Christian mythos is the adversary of Adonai. And the word devil actually means accuser or adversary. And that's because the devil stood against Adonai in the Garden of Eden. So the devil has become conflated with another being, Lucifer. Lucifer was is the most beautiful of the angels and was basically Adonai's right hand. The word Lucifer means light bearer, light bringer, and represents the planet Venus as it rises in the sky. And Venus, as the morning star, rises before the sun. And so it's kind of like a second sun. Keep that in mind, because we're going to be talking about that a little bit more. So Adonai is basically a sky/solar deity. And Lucifer is also kind of this solar deity. So they already kind of have this little antithesis between the two of them. Lucifer, however, is not the bad guy in the story. in my opinion, Lucifer is a great liberator, the bringer of freedom, the enlightener. And so getting the devil in a spread is actually a sign of something good, something difficult, certainly, but also something good. Whatever good is. So associated with the devil card is the Hebrew letter Zayin. I'm going to show you this other version of the devil. This is actually the version of the devil that was drawn by my grandfather. He drew the major arcana of the tarot, of which I have a set. This card is represented here by that letter, Zayin. And Zayin represents a sword or a sharp weapon. And one of the easiest ways of looking at Zayin in relation to the devil is that it's the sword of liberation, that it cuts through the chains that bind us, and it cuts the bonds of sleep. So I don't know how many of you have heard of this particular thinker, philosopher, teacher. His name was G.I. Gurdjieff, and his philosophy states that what we call wakefulness is actually a state of sleep. It's just a different type of sleep. And that true wakefulness is attainable, but only if you work for it. And so it's through hard work, meditation, and self-remembrance that a person can remain awake. A fourth ingredient to wakefulness is shocks. So in the Gurdjieffian philosophy, as you're writing through, doing your work, you come to a point where you kind of reach almost a plateau, and it's like jumping an octave. You need to do something to get to the next set, the next octave. And for Gurdjieff, those are shocks that pop you up and keep you awake. It's through those shocks that the food of the soul, this spiritual nutrition, is generated. The letter Zayin also deals with words that relate to nutrition and food, like the Hebrew word mazon, which means food. So, in cutting through these chains of delusion and in feeding the soul, what the devil is helping us to do, again in my opinion, is to help us alleviate karma, which is another thing that I think is vastly misunderstood. So karma isn't really a tit for tat thing. If I do something good happens. If I do something bad happens. That's not true. Karma is more a collection of habits that we exhibit over lifetimes and patterns that we pick up, patterns of behavior that keep us doing the same thing over and over and over again. As if we were asleep. We missed it. We missed why we did that. And so karma really is this cycle of repetition. And the devil comes in as this force that wakes us up and says, hey, why are you doing that? Hey, why are you doing that? Wake up. Look at this pattern and let's do the work to shift it. That's what the devil card, to me, represents in a spread. It's one of those shocks that's coming. Or if it's in relation to another card, like if it's in a spread for a relationship or a job or something, then there's something in that relationship or job that could possibly help to alleviate some karma, to shock us into wakefulness. It will be a challenge, of course. That's what the devil card represents. So the devil is the 15th card, a 1 and a 5. The 5 in the tarot and in Western numerology is the number of challenge. 1 is the number of unity and sovereignty. So the devil is, even numerologically, a challenge moving you toward unity and sovereignty within yourself. On the crooked path, the path of witchcraft, at least for me, and I know for some other people too, the devil is the great initiator. The devil draws you onto that path. And not out of spite or wickedness, but out of a sense of liberation, of freedom. That's what the crooked path really is. It's hard work and it is constraining in some ways, but it's really a path toward freedom and sovereignty. So I keep talking about the devil as a liberator. So if you add 1 and 5, you get 6. And the 6th card of the major arcana is the Lovers. The Lovers traditionally mean important relationships. They can signify important relationships. Relationships that are either in balance or out of balance, depending on how you pull it and what other cards are in the spread. Great teachers, especially teachers that you have a great affinity toward. Movement and unification of energies. Like, it can mean a lot of different things. For me, it's more about weighty choices, like deeply weighty choices, and really having to see things in a different light. That's when the Lovers pop up. So let's again look at these cards side by side. And you can see how similar they are. The angel in the Lovers card is the devil. So like I said, wrong one. So like I said, Lucifer was an angel. Usually this angel is represented as Raphael or Gabriel. For me, this angel is Lucifer. And like I said, Lucifer is a solar deity, and here's this great big sun shining behind Lucifer. You've also got this little mountain here, and the mountain has this gap between it. That's the separation of the spirit and the physical. And then over here you have Eve, and over here you have Adam. So let's talk a little bit about that. So in Genesis, in the beginning, Adonai creates two beings to live in Eden, in this paradise, which is actually more of a terrarium to keep his little pets in, who will offer their praises and worship and blah, 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 whatever. So he creates these basically golems out of clay and breathes life into them. That's Adam, and the first woman, Lilith. I'm sure you've heard of Lilith. But they are created at the same time from the same clay. They share the same power. Adam decides that he would rather that Lilith was subservient to him and lie underneath him, which Lilith is not about, because she understands that sharing power is where it's at, and I'm not going to give my power to you. No. So Adam goes to Adonai and complains. And Adonai takes from Adam a rib. Okay? So now we're going to get into a little bit of Gematria so that we can understand this card a little better. So the word Adam translates as man, but also as something that is red in color, something that has blood in it, and a living animal. That's Adam. Lilith translates as night specter, screech owl, screaming demon, other things. But it can also translate to, not itself, but a word related to it can translate as completeness. So if you perform Gematria with the word Lilith, another word that is correlated to it through Gematria is metom, which means completeness. So the name Lilith is related to the word for being complete. Now, if you take the word rib in Hebrew, that word is tsela, and the letters add up to 170. Looking at other words that add up to 170, we find silef, which means to subvert the truth, to twist the truth. And so, and you also find ties to the word for mind control. And so you take this word, this rib, or Adonai takes the rib, and basically subverts the truth of Lilith, gives her a new personality, someone a little bit more subservient, and names her Eve. And in Hebrew, the name Eve is Chava, and that translates as living and breathing, but also as coiled and encircling. And so you already have this connection of Eve with the serpent, which is what we're getting to. But also encircling, coiled, something twisted, something closed. If, again, we do Gematria with Chava, which adds up to 19, we also find the word for male enemy, which is Oyab, and Yoab, which means Yah is the father. So it's kind of like a clue to the truth and also a stamp of subservience that Adonai places on Lilith as Eve, that says, I am your father and you will do as I say. But also, Adam and I have kind of ganged up on you, and now you have to be subservient and keep the peace in Eden, which is what I want. I want peace in the garden, and I want your prayers and your worship and all of your attention. And as long as I get that, I don't really care how I get it. Seeing this from on high is Lucifer. And Lucifer looks into the garden and says, wow, this is fucked up. That's not okay. And so descends into the garden in the body of a serpent and talks to Eve and says, hey, girl, what's up? And Eve says, oh, nothing, just not feeling myself, talking snake. And Lucifer, in the guise of the serpent, says, that's because you're not yourself. Some crazy effed up shit has gone down, and I'm here to reveal the truth to you. but I can't tell you the truth. You have to find it for yourself. I'm going to give you the clue you need to figuring this out. And that is, you need to eat this fruit. And Eve says, wait, that fruit is forbidden. I've been told that I cannot eat that fruit. And Lucifer, in the guise of the serpent, as the devil, says, okay, sure, it's forbidden, but doesn't that make it seem a little juicier, a little more delicious? And Eve says, maybe you're right. And so she does eat of this fruit. My spin on this, my take, is that that fruit is psychoactive. And it sends Eve on a little trippy trip toward her true self. Now, is that the fruit of the mandrake? Is that a mushroom? Is that what? I don't know. Symbolically, it makes a lot of sense to be a mandrake, but also mushrooms make sense too. So whatever you want it to be. She ate a psychoactive thing and went on a trip. So Eve is the first psychonaut. Okay? So she goes on this trip and discovers the knowledge of good and evil, of the pure and the impure. And what she discovers about it is that that duality doesn't exist. There is no pure and impure. There is no duality. There is no light and dark. There is no masculine and feminine. There is no good and evil. There only is being. And being in all of its many manifestations and all of its differences and all of its glory. It isn't just this and that. It's not just black and white. It's black, white, red, purple, fuchsia, lime green, sienna, razzmatazz. There's all kinds of differences. There's all kinds of beauty in the world. And it's only because I've been told there's a duality that I can't believe outside of the duality. I can't see outside of it. And so, through this trip, her eyes are opened. Now, okay. Here is my grandfather's version of the lovers. And associated with the lovers is this letter, Ein. Ein, if you saw the last video on Qabalah and Gematria, you know that Ein can translate as nothingness. But Ein, as the letter, also translates to eye, like eyeball. And as you can see, this letter actually does have two eyes there at the top. But you can also see that, let's see, right there, I'm going to try and get that to focus in. That little branch of the Ein is a Zion. That's the devil, right there, in the letter, associated with this card. That's Lucifer already present in the lovers. Then the other branch here is actually a Nun, a final Nun, crowned with a Yud. So what is the symbolism there? So Ein has these two eyes. One is the top of Zayin, okay? That's one of those eyes. And then you also have that Yud at the top of the final Nun. That's the second eye. So we know that Zayin is related to the devil card. So what about this final Nun and the Yud? The final Nun One of the ways that it's seen is the serpent. And a yud is a closed hand, but is also the sign of the covenant, of the dedication, of the initiation. Yud is also a seed because it's a closed hand containing the possibility of all life, just like a seed is closed and contains the possibility for all life. And that seed is the head of the serpent. And so one of the ways that you can symbolize this is the serpent having its head removed, and the seeker, the witch, eats the head of the serpent, thereby gaining all of its knowledge, all of its power. Do not go out and eat the head of a snake. This is a symbol. This is a metaphor. Don't kill a snake. Okay. So, we've got these two eyes and the knowledge of the serpent encased in that one letter, Ein. And as I said, Eve's eyes are opened. But what eyes am I talking about? These two eyes are the eye of the sun, the outer sun, and the eye of the inner sun. The eye of the outer sun is represented by the solar orb. All of the forms that we interact with, that we see with our eyes, are revealed by light bouncing off of matter. And the eye of the outer sun sees that. That's the physical eye, the eye of action. Then you've got the eye of the inner sun, which is the eye of Venus. And remember that Lucifer is also the morning star, is also Venus. The light that is cast by the sun is a bright, white, physical light, right? Okay, lots of rhyming words. The light that's cast by the inner sun is Darklight. So in Milton, in his Paradise Lost, there is a quote, a phrase that says, "From those flames no light, but darkness visible." That's that dark light that's cast by Venus, the illuminating light of Lucifer. And it's by opening not only the physical eyes, the eye of the outer sun, but the inner eyes, the eye of the inner sun, that sees the dark light, that sees the light of the underworld, the eye that sees visions because it picks up on the light cast by the unseen, by the spectral. So, there is a couple of other things to mention. So on the Tree of Life, we went over that in the last video. There are pathways between the vessels that hold the astral light, the Sephirot. And each major arcana card represents one of those pathways. The pathway of the lovers, the path of Ein, is between Hod and Tiferet. The Sephirot of Hod is represented by Venus, and the Sephirot of Tiferet is the sun. So there you go. Those two eyes, the eye of Venus and the eye of the sun, are already present on the pathway between those Sephirot. Then the path of the devil, the path of Zayin, is from Tiferet to Binah. So the sphere of the sun and the sphere of Neptune. So remember, Neptune's glyph is a trident, so 3, where Ein is a split fork, basically a Y, which is 2. What we're trying to do here, the lesson between the devil and the lovers, is opening both sets of eyes, the eye of the sun and the eye of the inner sun, the eye of the outer sun, the eye of Venus, and using them both simultaneously, and thus opening the third eye, the eye of Neptune, the eye of understanding, of divine understanding, which is what Binah represents. So it's the interplay between these cards is the opening of psychic power, of a deeper understanding, of wakefulness. It is partially the dissolution of the false ego, but again, the ego is super important. What makes you unique, what makes you different, that part of your ego is so essential and necessary in the world. Dissolution of false ego, of what other people have told you you are, of what society tells you you are, of the constraints within an inherently flawed system that tell you your shape. Getting rid of that is essential to understanding your truest, most sovereign self as it is, as it exists. And it's by using the eye of the outer sun and the eye of the inner sun and opening the third eye, the eye of Neptune, that you can actually begin to see what that is. See what it is before it took form. And that's the interplay between the devil and the lovers. So one of the symbols that I think is actually really cool and represents the interplay here pretty well is Santa Lucia. So Santa Lucia is the saint with no eyes. She carries her eyes around on this little plate, which is pretty creepy, but in like the coolest way. So she's taken the eye of the sun and the eye of Venus and placed them on this plate in a third position, thus taking her out of duality. It's no longer the eye of Venus and the eye of the sun in two different ways, but simultaneously in the same place, seeing things from a different perspective, outside of duality, so that she can view reality. Isn't that cool? Holla yes. So cool. Anyway. So let's return to the symbolism on the tarot cards. Okay. So you've got Lucifer the angel in Eden with Adam and Eve, who is truly Lilith. And here you have Lucifer with Adam and Eve. But there are a few differences. So here, that divine presence is separate from the earth, separate from the physical. And it looks like they're free. They're not chained. It looks like they're free. But they're not. They're in Eden. They're in this terrarium. where they are not allowed to do as they want to do, or they're told who they need to be. Here, it looks like they're chained up, but they're actually free. Weird. I know. So also take a closer look at this card. We've got behind Eve, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And you've got the serpent there and also fruit in that tree. And then behind Adam, you've got the tree of life, which is covered in little flames, which represent the Sephirot, the qualities of the divine. That's its fruit. Okay? And you've got the angel with its hands raised, which is kind of like a hands-off kind of feel to this angel, until the angel descends as the serpent and speaks to Eve. Now, we come to the devil. Now that mountain has become that black rectangle that Adam and Eve are chained to. That black obelisk represents the physical, but as touched and enlivened by the spirit. It represents that dark light inherent in the physical, or unified with the physical. Here you see Eve has little horns because she's enlightened. Horns are a sign of enlightenment. They're a symbol of enlightenment. And her tail has a bunch of grapes. Also a sign of enlightenment through inebriation. But she ate of that fruit and it became a part of her own body. That's her tail. Then Adam also has horns because Adam became enlightened after Eve convinced him to eat the fruit too. And he ate of the fruit of the tree of life and it became a part of him. And now his tail has a little flame on it. They are chained to that rectangle, but it isn't a chain of bondage. It's a chain that links them to the foundation of their spirituality, of their practice, of their way of being. And you can see they're linked to that circle, which is a part of that obelisk. The circle is the sign of the Ouroboros, of the eternal. And that's what they're chained to. And remember, the eternal is Ein Sof, the movement within the astral light. This shows that they are actually chained to the astral light and the first intentions of creation. They aren't bound to materialism. They're bound to the astral light, which is the physical, which is the spiritual, which is everything. Okay. Then you've got the image of Lucifer back here, which is inspired by the Baphomet. This is not the Baphomet, but it's inspired by the Baphomet. And that is a sign of the astral light. The Baphomet was Eliphas Levi's way of representing the astral light and its magnetic properties. And we'll get into astral light at some point. But also on the head of the devil, of Lucifer, you have the upside down pentacle, which is the sign of the student. Divine knowing is being funneled into the head of Lucifer, who is immanent and present, crowning the practice and way of life of Lilith and Adam. The complete beings. And so you see that this relationship between the lovers and the devil is really about waking up, wakefulness. Through those shocks, through challenges, yes, it's not easy, but it's the process of opening your eyes and suddenly seeing the path to divine understanding. That's what I've got for you today on this wonderful, beautiful Tarot Tuesday. I hope that you enjoyed it. If you have any comments or if you have anything to say, any thoughts, I would love to hear them. Please put them in the comments. Hopefully going forward, I will be loading videos onto Patreon first. I'll put a link to my Patreon in the description, which means that you would get access to these videos a little bit early, not just on Tuesdays. So I'm going to try and have these up a couple days early for my patrons. Also on Patreon, you get kind of exclusive content. I'm not 100% sure what that's going to be, but I'll ask you once you become a patron. I'll also be loading them on YouTube later, so there's that. But we do appreciate our patrons. But go check it out, see if it's something that you'd be interested in patronizing. Yeah, okay. Anyway, I'll see you next Tuesday for another Tarot Tuesday, and may we meet in the twilight. Walk well until then. See ya.